When you start writing a brand new book, sometimes you just want to dive right into the story. But if you don't have kind of some details about the characters and where the story takes place and the general storyline, how can you really start writing it? Today's video, we talk about some important details that you should probably know before you start writing your book. Welcome to The Right Mama. My name is Jennifer Aline. I am the mother of twin girls, a freelance writer, and my debut novel, That Age, is coming out before the end of 2020. Today's video talks about what the heck you should probably have a general idea of before you start writing. Growing up, when I wrote my stories, I usually had a little idea, had a few thoughts about a character, and just started to write. I was definitely a pantser, and I will let you know what a pantser is over here. I did not plan. I just jumped right in and hoped the story would kind of tell me how to write it, which sometimes that does happen, and it's possible that stories can kind of write themselves. However, usually you have to have a few general details in line before you jump right into the story. So today we're just going to go over a few important pieces of information that you should maybe know before you start your story. We're going to go over 3 main parts, and in each part kind of break it up into some more details. The first part starts with characters. Characters are the big part of your story. They tell your story. You follow the characters. You believe in them or you despise them. You have emotions for the characters, whether you're writing them or reading about them. Characters usually drive the novel if it's a character-driven novel, which many are. A few general things that you should really know should be the name of your main characters. The name meaning the first name, middle name, and last name. You may not think that's important, but having that written down on either a Word document or in a journal or something before you start your book, it makes it a little bit easier for you if you're stuck in the middle of your book just thinking about what you should put as the middle name or what the last name was. If you have it written down beforehand, you go to that outline or you go to that paper, it's right there, you put it in. Also should know the age of your character, and if you really want, put their birthday down. That could be a good thing to know if you're writing and maybe their birthday's in October, and you're like, oh, crud, I need to do something about their birthday, or at least remember that their age changes in that month. So writing that down along with their name can be helpful. Then you get to the physical characteristics. It's good to know the physical characteristics of your character. What the heck do they look like? What I like to do sometimes is go on Pinterest. I look on Pinterest for people who look like my characters that I'm writing about. I've done this for past books, and since I just started a new work in progress, I just did this for this book. And it's really fun. It kind of gets you a better idea of what your character looks like and kind of makes the character more real, even though in your brain the character's pretty darn real. Physical characteristics include hair color, hair texture. Do they have straight hair, curly hair? Is it short? Is it long? Eye color, maybe eye shape. You may want to know if they have freckles. What is the tone of their skin color? What's their height? What's their weight? Do they have a pear-shaped body? Are they more of an athletic build? Knowing these little details before you write your book will help sculpt the character, sculpt the storyline, and make the story more relatable. Another important part of the character point we're talking about is the ethnicity and the cultural background of your characters, especially if you want to include and incorporate diverse characters in your stories, which honestly you should put lots of diversity in your books because it's real life. We're writing in real time and you want as many readers to relate as possible. So knowing the background of your character can be good, whether they are of Asian descent. Maybe you need to know where in Asia, because if you're writing a name, you want to specify and you want to make sure it's right. Maybe your character's half black and half white. Hair texture, what characteristics link them to a certain ethnicity or a certain culture? What they have an accent. What about their background and their culture connects them to that heritage? So knowing about their ethnicity, some diverse readers, you want to make sure Diverse readers, knowing about the different cultures that are connected with your characters can be very good to know, especially making sure that it's right, because you don't want it to be wrong, because your readers will let you know. It's also great to know the personality of your characters, because their personality is what makes them interesting to read about. It's what makes them connect with the audience. You want to know if they're shy, maybe they're outspoken, maybe they're blunt, maybe they're only opinionated when they're drinking. You want to know their personality, and you want to know what about them makes them unique. So when you're writing, it comes out. A little bit about their beliefs can also be good before you jump into your story. If there's someone who's religious, that will impact the storyline a little bit. If there's somebody who believes in certain political views, that will also play a part. So having a little idea of their beliefs, whether it's a few notes on your document or in your journal, can be good when going back and remembering what the heck they believed in. I've run into this one a lot, and that's family background. Knowing the name of the mom, the dad, the background and heritage of the mom and dad. Do they work? What do they do for their job? You want to know if they're divorced. Are they? You don't need to go into the nitty-gritty, but just having an idea of the family dynamic is good, especially if there's siblings. What are their names? You can even do full name with a middle name. You can even get into details with birthdays. But at least knowing the names of the parents, their marital status, and if there's any siblings that are important can be helpful when you start writing. The last part that we're going to talk about when it comes to the character's point is probably the most important, and it's the needs, wants, and goals. This is kind of what brings the entire character point together, because the needs, wants, and goals of your main characters or the side characters really are what bring the storyline and the plot together. Of course, when you back up, knowing the plot is important, and we'll get to that point, but knowing what your character needs out of their story, what they want, and what their general goal is, can be a huge game changer when you start writing, because you don't want to just babble on for chapters. Each chapter needs to mean something, and you want each chapter to be bringing the character or the side characters or their story to the goal they're trying to get to. Was point one. I talked a lot of it, about character details, and that's kind of the fun part before you start writing the story, is really getting to know those characters, going on Pinterest, finding people who look like your characters, learning about your characters, really getting to know them as if they're real people, because when you write the story, they kind of become real. So knowing a lot about the characters is fun and helpful. Point we're going to talk about is setting. It's good to know where your book takes place before you start writing the book. I have always had a certain town, at least my last few books have had one certain small town. It's a fictional town that I have made this setting. And before I even kind of wrote those books, I drew out what the world looks like. And even though my books are women's fiction, chick lit, romance, whatever, and a lot of fantasy writers will do a huge world building, even if you're not a fantasy writer, you can draw out what your town looks like if it's a fictional town. So it's good to know if your town is fictional, if you made it up maybe based on another town, or if it's a real city or a real town. Is it New York City? Is it Boston? Is it LA? You need to know from the start where your story takes place. Sometimes that I made up is a small lake town, and it's kind of in central New York. That's what I say. I don't say, oh, it's near Syracuse and Albany and blah, blah, blah. I don't make those details because I want the reader to kind of just go with it. And since it's the name of the town or city, make sure you put that down, because honestly, that can change as you write if you don't write it down. Important locations in your city that maybe your characters go to, any restaurants, bars, coffee shops, schools, hospitals, anything like that, write it down. You want to make sure you know those details. Like I said, if there's roads where they live on, write those down, because those can be easily forgotten. Transportation, is it mostly just a car town? Are there subways? Are there trains? What kind of transportation is big in this town? Point number 2 is setting. Have fun, draw a picture. You can pick up a town, go for it, but make it realistic and do it in an organized way. You don't want to mesh too much together so it confuses the reader, but do it so when this reader reads your story, they really feel like this town could be real. If it's a real town, do your research. Just do your research. New York City, you have a lot of research to do. If it's another big city, you gotta do the research. If you haven't been there, you should probably visit. It's different, I feel, when you do write real cities and real towns. That's, I think, part of the reason I like making up my own that's inspired by places I've been, is maybe you won't have to be as specific and you can make it up and it's fun. But if you're doing a real city, which is awesome and super relatable, make sure you get it right. Last point we're going to talk about is the storyline. We talked about characters, setting, and number 3 is storyline. Of course, a story needs a storyline, and we start off with plot. Plot. What is the main objective of your story and your character? What is the point? What goal does your character need to at least try to accomplish? In a couple sentences. Sometimes people like to make a little blurb giving them a general idea of so-and-so really wants this, they're going to do this, this, and that to try to get it, and give a general idea of what your character or characters are trying to do. If side characters or important main characters, maybe they each have a subplot or a different focus that is not the same as the main plot, what are those subplots? This is something that takes me a while to organize. I like to write multiple points of view, and all the main characters have a general plot or a general goal, but they each have a story. So I have a lot to organize when it comes to subplots, and I do this before I start writing. In the past, I didn't. In the past, I would just jump in and hope for the characters to write it, and sometimes they would, but then I might stop after a few chapters and have to kind of organize my thoughts. Doing it before can be a game changer. It can clear your brain, clean the story up, and make your first draft less chaotic. And I know some people say first drafts, no matter what, are crazy. But if you do a little bit of thinking and a little bit of organizing before, it won't be as hectic. It'll be a little bit better when you go through it again and again. People go into their story not knowing the end of the story, and that's okay. You really want to know the beginning. You want to know kind of if there's a beat in the middle that makes an eruption, makes the reader go, or is rising action and gets interest. But you also want to have a general idea of what that ending climactic point is. And sometimes you start the story not knowing, and that's okay. You don't have to have all the answers. But having a general idea, at least of the beginning and the point that's going to be in the middle that kind of erupts a little bit, can at least lead you towards what might happen at the end if you don't know. Honestly, half of the books I've written, I did not know the ending, and the books just kind of wrote themselves. I kind of did like what I just said, is the beginning point, the middle point, and then all of a sudden the ending happened. The book I just started writing, I actually know the ending, which is kind of exciting, so I just want to get to it, but I have a lot to do to get there. The ending all the time, and this is my personal opinion. All writers are different, and some authors might say, no, you should know every single beat and point of your story, but if you just want to jump into it, jump into it. It's your book and your story and your characters, and what happens, happens. Talked about 3 points that should kind of be focused on before you jump into the story, which are characters, setting, and storyline. Of course, there's a lot that come with each of those points, and hopefully you can have a general idea of what most of those are. Make a document, put it in a journal. Some people make binders, or they have planners that are specifically for each book they're writing or the book they're writing at the time. And that's awesome. It makes it real. It makes you ready to go, organized, focused, ready to attack the story. So if you're listening, if you like this kind of stuff, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I post every Friday. Sometimes I'll throw in a pop-up video just for fun. So thank you so much. Stay creative, and it is really, really hot right now. It's iced coffee time.